Welcome back to Les Schwab Tire Center's Outdoor GPS, presented by Fisherman's Marine and Outdoor. Now it's time for your weekend tech tip, brought to you by Chevy Silverado.
This week's Chevy Silverado tech tip of the week. I just might as well say it more often. We're going to talk about stuff for baits, right? You've got the Brad's, super baits. Almost said the wrong thing. You also have spin and fish from Yakima Bait, which is arguably becoming as popular as these super baits for good reasons. And there's so many different versions, from the little tiny kokanee size, which, by the way, this exact one was one of my baits for summer Chinook last year. And I didn't have a lot of consistency last year, but I actually had a little consistency with this little tiny thing. So don't overlook that kokanee size for Chinook as well. But all these different versions, you got Spin Dogs from Simon. You've got the hard cut plug bait from Simon as well, the 3.0. You've got, again, the Brad's super bait cut plug, the stuffer guy here. You've got the original stuffer bait, the one that actually started it all. The super bait, which is extremely effective. And then, of course, just different sizes of everything, from the 3.0 to the 2.5 spin and fish, all the way up to even the 5.0s, the 4.0s, which I wouldn't recommend for behind a 360, but behind a Big Al's Fish Flash, yeah, those bigger ones work just fine, especially a lot like what Jack was referring to with a bunch of smelt in the river. So that could be something to keep in mind. And that was a tidbit. I was not aware that the smelt were that thick in some of our smaller rivers yet. But here we go, a couple of different things to look at. I'm gonna say my favorite way as of right now, which could certainly change, when you're talking about these super baits, in particular the original, it is a 3-hook setup. And the reason for that is it gives you that extra point of contact. It gives you not any more flexibility, but when those fish do come up and attack this particular bait, having that extra hook, yeah, you know, I did lose fish with it, of course, because that's just what happens, right? That's called fishing. But when you do have that third hook, there's a little bit more confidence there, and just, again, another hook point out there to go after them. And you don't have to get too crazy with that, but the spacing is relatively important if you're going to do the 3-hook setup. These are all 3/0 hooks. That's typically what I use for all of my baits like this, these hard baits. But I like to have that red hook right by the bait. To me, it just looks a little bit better, maybe a little bit more natural. And then from there, of course, I've just got the nickel finished hooks like the majority of everyone's using, of course. And don't overlook the old school chrome hooks. There's a reason why those are still extremely popular, everyone. I'm just throwing that out there. But that 3-hook setup is certainly a way that I am very confident. Now, going to the spin and fish, you can see that there's one here that's just a standard rigging with the 1 6mm bead, a couple of hooks behind it, spaced correctly, of course. You want to make sure that they aren't touching, but very, very close to one another, with the eye and the shank being very close to one another. Then, another very popular way to rig a spinning fish from either the 2.5 like this size here or the 3.0 is just a 2-hook setup with that skirt behind it. The hoochie skirt behind it is very, very popular for a reason. It just gives you a little bit more profile with this little tiny stuffer bait, because that's not all that big. That's really designed for kokanee, much like the kokanee size Brad's super bait. It's just that smaller profile, but the salmon, especially in warmer water conditions, really do gravitate to that. But I'm going to obviously admit that the most common setup for these baits is just going to be a mooching rig, just a 2-hook setup, fixed setup, with 2 3/0s. So don't overthink it, right? But just find that setup that you're comfortable with. Which one that you are more confident in may be the best way to do it. When we come back from this break, I want to talk about the storage of them, though. We invest a ton of money into these baits. We want to make sure that they're going to be usable for a long time. And I'm going to have a couple ideas for you when we come back with that in a minute. Don't go anywhere.